In March of 2036, 6 human beings walked through an airlock in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile and began an 18-month isolation that would test whether survival on Mars is physiologically possible or merely an aspiration built on optimism. The habitat they entered was not a simulation. It was a full-scale, fully operational prototype of the surface station planned for the first crewed landing on Mars, scheduled for the early 2040s. Every system inside had been engineered to function exactly as it would on the Red Planet. Every failure that occurred would be treated as if rescue were 40 million miles away. The mission was designated Mars Duration Test 1, a joint initiative between NASA and SpaceX, with technical support from the European Space Agency and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. The crew consisted of a mission commander with prior ISS experience, a geologist specializing in planetary soil chemistry, a physician trained in remote surgery, a mechanical engineer responsible for life support systems, a botanist tasked with food production, and a software specialist managing communications and data flow. None of them would leave the habitat for 547 days. None of them would breathe outside air, feel rain, or speak to another human being without a communication delay of up to 24 minutes. The site had been selected for its Martian fidelity. The Atacama is one of the driest places on Earth, receiving less than 15 millimeters of rain per year in some areas. Its soil is laced with perchlorates, the same toxic salts found in Martian regolith. Daytime temperatures reached 30 degrees Celsius. At night, they plummeted to -40. The habitat was a cluster of 3 cylindrical modules connected by pressurized tunnels, surrounded by solar arrays, a small nuclear reactor simulator, and a regolith processing unit designed to extract water from subsurface ice analogs. The entire structure was buried beneath 2 meters of excavated rock to shield against radiation exposure, equivalent to what astronauts would face on Mars. Communication with Mission Control in Houston operated under enforced latency. Every transmission was delayed by 22 to 24 minutes, depending on the simulated orbital position of Earth and Mars. If something went wrong, the crew would have to solve it themselves. If they asked for help, they would wait nearly an hour for a response. If they made a mistake, there would be no abort option, no emergency extraction, no medevac helicopter waiting beyond the perimeter fence. The mission rules were explicit. Treat every problem as if you are on Mars, because one day, someone will be. The first 3 months unfolded according to plan. The crew adapted to the habitat's recycling rhythms. Water was extracted from urine and exhaled moisture through a closed-loop filtration system nearly identical to those on the International Space Station. Every liter was accounted for. Showers were limited to 2 minutes, twice per week, using a misting nozzle that recovered 95% of the water used. Laundry was forbidden. Clothing was worn until it degraded, then incinerated in a small waste processing unit that converted organic material into sterile ash and methane for auxiliary power. Oxygen was generated by electrolysis, splitting water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen using solar power during the day and reserve battery banks at night. The system functioned reliably at first, but it was not designed with excess capacity. A single compressor failure, a crack in a storage tank, or a power shortfall could begin a slow countdown to asphyxiation. The crew monitored oxygen partial pressure hourly. They knew the margins. At 15% atmospheric oxygen, cognitive function begins to degrade. At 10%, unconsciousness follows within minutes. The habitat maintained 21%, but the buffer between safety and catastrophe was narrow. Food was a hybrid system. 70% of calories came from pre-packaged freeze-dried rations, nutritionally complete but monotonous. The remaining 30% came from a hydroponic greenhouse module where the botanist cultivated lettuce, tomatoes, radishes, and dwarf wheat under LED grow lights calibrated to replicate the Martian solar spectrum, filtered through simulated atmospheric dust. The plants grew slowly. Yields were lower than projected. By the 4th month, it became clear that the greenhouse could not sustain the crew indefinitely. Rations were stretched. Meal portions shrank. Hunger became a constant low-grade companion. The isolation was absolute. No visitors, no deliveries, no physical contact with anyone beyond the 5 others sharing the same recycled air. Families could send video messages, but the delay made conversation impossible. A question asked on Monday might be answered on Tuesday. Emotional exchanges became asynchronous and stilted. The crew began to feel the psychological weight of disconnection, the sensation that the world outside the habitat was moving forward, while they remained suspended in a sterile loop of repetition. By the 6th month, the first serious failure occurred. A microfracture in the primary water filtration membrane allowed untreated contaminants to pass into the potable supply. The problem was detected only after the physician began experiencing gastrointestinal distress. Testing confirmed coliform bacteria. The contaminated water was flushed, and the backup filtration system was activated, but it operated at 60% capacity. Water rations were cut by 1/3. Showers were eliminated. Drinking water was prioritized. The crew began to smell each other, a sour, stale odor that clung to the interior of the habitat and could not be washed away. The temperature swings outside the habitat grew more extreme as the austral winter approached. Nighttime lows reached -42 degrees Celsius. The habitat's thermal insulation was rated to -50, but it was not perfect. Cold seeped through the walls. Interior temperatures dropped to 12 degrees Celsius during the coldest hours. The crew slept in thermal sleeping bags, wore insulated layers constantly, and restricted movement to conserve body heat. The mechanical engineer spent hours each day inspecting seals, checking for frost accumulation in ventilation ducts, and monitoring the heat exchanger that kept the interior livable. A failure in that system would mean freezing to death within hours. In the 7th month, a dust storm rolled across the Atacama. It was not Martian in scale, but it was sustained enough to obscure the sun for 11 days. Solar power generation dropped to 15% of normal output. The nuclear simulator provided baseline power, but it was not sufficient to run all systems simultaneously. Decisions had to be made. Heating was reduced. The greenhouse lights were dimmed, oxygen production slowed, carbon dioxide levels began to rise. The crew wore portable CO2 scrubbers and moved slowly to reduce metabolic demand. They spoke less. They conserved energy. They waited for the dust to clear, knowing that on Mars, such storms can last for months. The psychological deterioration was gradual but measurable. The data analyst, responsible for logging daily health metrics, began to notice patterns. Sleep quality declined. Reaction times lengthened. Interpersonal conflicts increased in frequency and intensity. Small irritations became points of open hostility. The sound of someone chewing. The way another crew member breathed. These became sources of irrational anger. The mission commander instituted mandatory conflict resolution sessions, but they often ended in silence or tears. The physician documented the physical toll. Bone density scans, conducted monthly using portable ultrasound, showed measurable loss in load-bearing bones despite daily resistance exercise. Muscle mass decreased. Vision began to degrade in 2 crew members due to increased intracranial pressure, a known effect of prolonged horizontal posture in confined gravity environments. The botanist developed a stress fracture in her left foot from repetitive impact during exercise. It could not heal properly under the conditions of the habitat. She continued to work in pain, knowing that on Mars, there would be no alternative. By the 10th month, communication delays became emotionally unbearable. A crew member received a message that his father had died. He composed a response, sent it, and waited 24 minutes for acknowledgement. The exchange felt hollow. Grief could not be shared in real time. He withdrew, stopped participating in group meals, and spent hours alone in his sleep module, staring at the curved metal ceiling. The physician monitored him for signs of clinical depression, but had limited pharmaceutical options. Therapy conducted over a 48-minute round-trip delay was ineffective. He was asked to continue. He did. The greenhouse began to fail in the 12th month. A fungal infection spread through the wheat crop, likely introduced by contaminated soil substrate. The infection was resistant to available antifungals. The wheat was lost. Vegetable yields dropped. The crew returned to full reliance on packaged rations, which were now running low. Mission Control authorized a one-time resupply drop by drone, but it was treated as a mission failure. The parameters of the test required complete autonomy. The resupply was logged as a survival intervention that would not be possible on Mars. In the 14th month, the systems engineer discovered a coolant leak in the life support module. The leak was slow but persistent, and the coolant reservoir was finite. If it emptied completely, the heat exchanger would fail, and the habitat would become uninhabitable within 6 hours. Repair required accessing an external valve in a simulated extravehicular activity. 2 crew members suited up in prototype Mars EVA suits depressurized the airlock and stepped into the sub-zero exterior. The repair took 4 hours. Their gloves stiffened in the cold, their visors fogged. One crew member reported numbness in his fingers that persisted for 2 days afterward. The leak was sealed, but the experience left the crew with the clear understanding that every repair carried the risk of frostbite, equipment failure, or death. The final months were a test of endurance. The crew had learned to survive, but surviving was not the same as thriving. They moved through routines mechanically. Conversations were minimal. Laughter was rare. The mission commander noted in her log that the crew had stopped talking about the future. They no longer discussed what they would do after the mission ended. They existed only in the present, in the narrow space between one task and the next, one breath and the next, one day and the next. When the 18 months concluded, the hatch was opened, and the crew emerged into daylight they had not seen in a year and a half. They did not smile. They did not celebrate. They stood in the wind, blinking against the brightness, feeling the weight of natural gravity and the strangeness of unlimited space. Medical teams conducted immediate assessments. Bone density had decreased by an average of 8%. Muscle mass was down 12%. Vision impairment was present in 3 crew members. Psychological evaluations revealed symptoms consistent with chronic stress, social withdrawal, and mild depressive episodes in 4 out of 6 participants. The data collected from Mars Duration Test 1 was not encouraging. It confirmed what engineers and mission planners had feared. Human beings can survive months on Mars, but survival extracts a cost that cannot be fully mitigated by technology. The isolation is real. The cold is real. The hunger, the fear, the monotony, the fragility of every system that keeps you alive, these are real. And on Mars, there will be no resupply drone, no emergency extraction, no shortening of the mission if things go wrong. Preparing humanity to live on another planet is not a matter of building better rockets or more efficient habitats. It is a matter of accepting that the human body and mind were not designed for such environments, and that every person who goes will be changed by it. Some will adapt, some will break. And all of them will carry the knowledge that survival on Mars depends not on hope, but on discipline, redundancy, and the willingness to endure conditions that would, in any other context, be considered inhumane. That is the cost. That is what it will take. That is what Mars demands.